How much of the controversy do we want to bring up? Because you don't want to give too much exposure to the fact that, yeah, guys hate women, guys. So welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob.
And this is Kai.
And today we're here to talk about Ghostbusters, because if you've been on the internet in the last several months to a year, you probably have caught wind of the fact that there's a lot of people that seem to hate this movie, even though it's not even out yet, which we'll get into a little bit. But before we get to Ghostbusters, we wanted to do a quick thoughts on a couple other recent releases. We both saw Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates and The Secret Life of Pets recently. The Secret Life of Pets, which released to, I believe it was like $100 million at the box office, which is the new record now, beating out Pixar's Inside Out, which was, the previous record holder for, I guess, the highest grossing opening weekend for an original property. So, do you think? I guess you just said this is Kai, but let's hear some more from Kai. She's being awfully shy today so far.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you.
That's okay. I don't mind being interrupted. You have no problem interrupting me when the mic's off. So
hey, wait a minute. Keep the gloves in the ring. No, just kidding. Well, we saw Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates and Finding Secret Life of Pets.
Just said that
right before they came out, and I guess to start with Secret Life of Pets, my opinion is I expected a lot more from this film. I remember when the trailer came out, I think a year ago. Like last June?
Yeah, something like that. They were teasing it way in
advance.
Minions,
I think I saw it.
Well, it's the same studio, so that makes sense.
Yeah, and they had the cute opener with all the animals and how they act behind the scenes. And then they did more trailers where it started looking like Toy Story. But my opinion was just that I was disappointed. I expected more out of this movie, and I don't think it delivered. I think it took a lot of components from Toy Story 1, Toy Story 2, and even Toy Story 3, because there's a scene with a whole bunch of animals, weird animals, scary animals, that was reminiscent to me of Toy Story 3.
You're talking about... No, we're not going to get into spoilers, really, but you're talking about in the alleyway?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And in the...
Well, see, that reminds me more of Toy Story, the first one, where all those mutant toys at Sid's house were coming out, supposedly to attack Buzz Lightyear, but then was really, repaired his arm. Remember that?
Yeah, okay. All right.
But basically, long story short, because we're just touching base on this one briefly, I wrote a review for CheatSheet.com on Secret Life of Pets, and the whole crux of my response was, yeah, it's basically like Toy Story, only with animals instead of toys, and pretty much that. I mean, it seems like the movie basically coasts on the idea that, when people go to work, the animals are all up to crazy adventures, and didn't really have nearly enough heart as stuff like Toy Story or even earlier this year's Zootopia and Finding Dory, which I think are both far superior films. It was a little spastic and over the top,
and that's not fair because those are all Disney properties.
Well, those are better movies. I'm going by animated movies.
Yeah, what does that tell us about animated films that are not Disney properties?
Well, I mean, just even going with Illumination Entertainment, I feel like both Despicable Me movies are way stronger than this one was, as far as from a narrative perspective, from a character perspective, from a comedy perspective, and from a sentiment, like a heart perspective.
Do you think that Illumination's now just coasting? Do you think that they're getting a little too comfortable with their place with the Minions?
The fact that the Minions made like over $1 billion, and there was multiple references to them in this movie, and even a short film beforehand. I feel like they're so focused on chasing the next big franchise for them, and I guess this is going to be it since Secret Life of Pets was so successful. But I mean, they're just not up to that level. But then again, look at, you have the Ice Ages. They have like Ice Age, I don't know, 4 or 5, whatever, coming out later this month, and that's going well for them. So clearly, when it comes to kids' movies, quality doesn't really matter as much, unfortunately. I mean, adult movies too. You have, Transformers 5 on the way. So it's yeah. But I agree with you. The cleverness of the premise that was sort of revealed in that initial teaser trailer, which is really just basically the first 3 minutes of the movie is that teaser trailer.
Right.
Didn't really, beyond that, it didn't really work for me. I kind of, honestly, I was sort of losing my interest periodically throughout there. There's a lot of, it's only 90 minutes, and I feel like there's a lot of filler. I will say that the voice acting was good. And
is it actually even? I thought it was 80 minutes.
No. I think on IMDb it's like an hour and 30 minutes.
Oh.
I will say that the voice acting was pretty strong across the board. I particularly like Jenny Slate as Gidget. I thought she was the standout, and the animation was strong, and visually it was worked on a spectacle level. But just narratively, I just didn't really care about any of the characters, and the story wasn't particularly engaging or original or creative. So it's a little disappointing that that's now the highest opening weekend for an original film, since it's not really that good of one, and since Inside Out is so far superior in essentially every way.
So Zootopia is not an original?
Yeah, but it didn't make as much money as this one.
That's a surprise to me.
I know.
Because Zootopia, I was very excited about that too, and I love Flash, and I love Zootopia in every way. So that is a surprise.
I think the marketing campaign for Secret Life of Pets was really strong. Like, I think everybody responded like you did to that first teaser trailer.
Plus,
like, oh my God, this
it's
looks
a
so
summer
cute.
movie.
Well, yeah.
And summer movies are usually stronger anyway.
Yeah, it's true. Zootopia was what, March?
March, yeah.
Yeah.
And,
so,
and even Civil War. I mean, Civil War was May, so I guess that was the start of the...
Yeah, no, Disney's been on every month, like a giant movies coming out. And most of them, with the exception of Alice Through the Looking Glass, have been really successful. Finding Dory actually just usurped Captain America Civil War as the highest grossing movie of the year domestically. So of the top 5 highest grossing movies this year, I think 4 of them are Disney.
Yeah, well, that's going to be probably par for course for the next.
Well, I mean, with
30 years,
Rogue One might be up there too, so it might push out. I think whatever it is, Deadpool or something, that's up there. So that's Secret Life of Pets. Decent movie, not bad. If you have little kids, they'll sure enjoy it. But I mean, if you're looking for anything other than like a way to kill an hour and a half at the movies and keep your kids entertained, I don't really think you're gonna find a lot of replay value in it. So I guess be careful that your kids don't fall super in love with the film, because you might end up watching it like 20 times a day. It's not one of those like Finding Nemo or I'm trying to think of something that's not Pixar, so I could show a little more well-roundedness. Or like some of the Leica Studios ones, or Leica. I always forget how to say that. If it's Leica or Leica. I'll say Leica, which is the Paranorman Box Trolls. I feel like that's a non-Pixar entity that is actually doing really consistent work. And they have a film coming out next month called Kubo and the Two Strings that I'm really looking forward to. So that's our thoughts on Secret Life of Pets. Take it as you will, but we're sort of giving it kind of an average. I gave it a 3 out of 5 on cheatsheet.com. So if you want to check out my review, you can search for it over there. So shifting over to a very different movie, Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates. What did you think about this, and what were your expectations going in? Because I actually saw the trailer with another movie and then showed it to you. I was like, look at this crazy movie.
It's
very much a guy movie.
Yes.
Is it? Because, I mean, it's balanced. The 4 leads, 2 females, 2 males. So I feel like it's more of a guy... I shouldn't say guy, because that's sexist, and we're talking in the Ghostbusters episode. Saying something's a guy movie is probably not the best way to go. But it is definitely that crass sense of humor that typically the studio system sees as appealing more to males. I guess I should say it that way.
When I first saw when you first showed me the trailer, yeah, I did think I was not going to like this movie, because it just looked like it was going to be crass. Plus, you also showed me the Red Band trailer.
Well, of course. That's
so
the one
you didn't show me any of the tame stuff you see in an actual trailer. You showed me all the gross stuff.
Well, that's more fun.
Yeah.
The push pop gag made me laugh.
Yeah. So I was like, what? So I didn't know how to respond to this, and I don't feel like I was as excited to go to see this movie as I was about The Secret Life of Pets. But it's hard to say. I actually may have liked Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates more. I think I gave it a 3 in my own mind, because I don't do reviews. But
well, you're on Letterboxd.
I am on Letterboxd.
As am I, so you can find both of us on there.
Yeah. I think I gave Secret Life of Pets a higher rating, but there was just parts I don't know. I felt like Aubrey Plaza, she handed up for the camera a lot more than the other 3 leads. And I could just tell that she was acting. That's
funny that you say that, because I feel like most of the reviews that I've seen, actually Aubrey Plaza gets singled out as the best one in the movie.
I don't know what they're talking about. She's not terrible. She's not terrible at all. The acting's great on her, but it just appeared to me that she was acting.
Right. I guess. I mean, well, she's in a movie, so that makes sense. But I actually thought Aubrey Plaza and Adam Devine were were the standouts from that movie. I thought they played off each other particularly well. Anna Kendrick was sort of doing like a more edgy version of her like adorkable thing from Pitch Perfect, and Zac Efron. It seemed like he was sort of kind of playing the same character he did in Neighbors and Neighbors 2.
But he was definitely a straight man.
But he's not particularly wacky in Neighbors either. I mean, I didn't think so.
Right. Was that Seth Rogen, you think? That was a wacky one?
I don't know who. There was nobody that was necessarily wacky.
Rose Byrne was the wacky one.
It was the conflict between the two sides where the wackiness came from. If anybody in those movies, in the Neighbors films, and now we're getting off topic, but if anybody in the Neighbors films really like goes way over the top, it's probably Ike Barinholtz. And I told you about Neighbors 2, which you haven't seen, that he has some of the like more outlandish moments in that. But yeah, I don't know. Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates. Comedies are tricky for me. And I actually think that Neighbors 2, which I just mentioned, Pop Star, which I mentioned last time, and actually The Nice Guys, which is more of an action comedy. I feel like those are all probably the strongest comedies this year. I know a lot of people didn't really care for Neighbors 2, but I thought it was a slight improvement over the first one. And this one wasn't quite up to that level. But I'm not usually into the gross out like sexual humor, and this had a lot of that. Some of it worked for me and some of it didn't, so in that way it's sort of a mixed bag, but I think it's worth seeing for the cast and the performances. And I think the story did come together towards the end a lot more than a lot of films of this ilk, I guess. Would you agree with that?
You mean like the theme of the movie?
Yeah, the story.
Yeah.
Like the way it all tied together, and the way, the characters grew or not grew, and what they learned about themselves.
It was interesting that all four of them had an arc.
Yeah.
And it was all kind of in the same spot, which is ownership.
Right.
Accountability.
Yeah. So I guess it's basically the premise is that it starts out with the two guys and the two girls being painted as like total opposites, to the point that, and I think maybe the guys see some of themselves in these girls. So it's sort of like coming to grips with who you are and your place in the world, and kind of being like, wait a minute, am I just as crazy as these people? Because, it starts out with them thinking that the girls are respectable as fuck. And then it turns out that they're actually, they're all sort of on the same level in a lot of ways. So I'd say that's a mild recommendation.
The only difference between the two brothers and the two friends is you have, Mike and Dave. No one ever really came out and said this, but it looked like they came from money. They're going. There's the wedding in Hawaii.
Who pays? I forget. Who pays? Who's supposed to pay for the wedding?
The bride's.
The bride's family.
Bride's family. Okay. If they follow that tradition,
I guess
it was just going to be the couple.
They never made it clear who had who was funding that extravagant Hawaiian wedding.
But it looked like that Mike and Dave came from money, because they were like
all their family events are really out.
Yeah, and they're slackers. They're just like living in this bachelor pad, not doing anything.
Probably selling their liquor.
Yeah,
that's not obviously none of these are spoilers, but
and so then you have the friends that they're pretty much look like they're broke, and they steal cab rides and stuff, and but then you realize that even though two come from a rich background and others come from a not more low income, they are very similar. So I thought that was an interesting contrast.
Yeah.
They're all not so different after all.
I would say for both of these movies, sort of a mild recommendation. I actually reviewed Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates over at WeGotThisCovered.com, because I'm everywhere, guys. And I also gave it 3 out of 5. So I feel like they're both entertaining, but in a disposable way. You know what I mean? Like, you could watch both of them and be like, that was good, I guess, and then sort of shrug it off and be like, oh, did I see that? One of those kinds of movies.
Yeah.
The kind of movie that you're not gonna buy on Blu-ray and cherish, show all your friends. But if you're flipping around on TV and it's on Comedy Central or TNT or something, be like, oh, okay, we'll leave this on. This is decent. It's more they're both in that category for me. I don't even think people click around on TNT anymore. I feel like that's a pass. That's a kind of an outdated reference.
Well, yeah, because whenever
TBS
I look on
classics.
whenever I go on TNT, it's always playing Law and Order.
That's a good point. They really are, or Bones or something.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm bored, and then I click to TBS, which usually has something fun.
So unless you've been living under a rock the last several months, you probably heard that there's a new Ghostbusters movie coming out. And much to the chagrin of a certain segment of the population, they're not too happy with either A, the idea that a Ghostbusters reboot is happening, or I guess happened, or B, that it stars 4 women in the lead. So what do you kind of make of this whole situation? Do you think it's just people pissed off that they're redoing Ghostbusters at all, or do you think that it's just people being like, "Ooh, this is a boys' club, no girls allowed," that kind of thing?
I think it's a little bit of both, and I actually kind of think that it's that some of the people that are saying that it's not a female issue, even some women themselves, I think they're doing a cover up by saying, "Oh, how dare you reboot Ghostbusters? It's my, how dare you do that?" But it's also nobody seemed to have an issue when Mad Max was rebooted.
Yeah,
and
but
they had three Mad Max movies in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, but that wasn't a reboot. That was a sequel more. I would say that's more of it. I would say Fury Road is more of a sequel because it doesn't explicitly state that those things never happened. We're starting fresh. This movie's like, yeah, there was never ghosts before. Oh, we're going to come up with this thing. What if we call ourselves? Ghostbusters? All right.
So
that's never been done.
So what's the difference between a reboot and a sequel or a remake?
A remake to me, we've talked about this a million times, but you're just trying to prompt me on the podcast?
Yes, I am.
A remake to me is when you're retelling a single story over again, same characters, same, like if you made a Casablanca movie, and this is always the example I go to, you would have to have the same characters, a similar story. There's no world to reboot. In my mind, a reboot is more for a franchise. So if you have so in this case, if you have there's a concept and there's people that wear these backpacks and they shoot these beams at ghosts, you can reboot that with different characters and a new world and then expand it from that point. If they had
That sounds like Mad Max. That's a reboot.
No, there's nothing in there that contradicts it. Plus you haven't even seen Mad Max movies, so...
Well, yeah.
So how do you...
Well, how is it Yeah, well, okay. Well, you were about to answer. What's the difference between a reboot and a sequel?
I already said. Oh, a sequel?
Yes.
A sequel is a continuation of the same story. So how
is Ghostbusters 2 a sequel and Mad Max Fury Road is also a sequel?
It could be viewed as a sequel / reboot, but it's not necessarily a pure reboot because it's never stated in there, this guy, how did he get to this place? He's just in this place. He wasn't always Mad Max. He was a cop, and there was a whole story in the first film with that.
Okay, that makes sense. What about Total Recall? Is that a remake or a reboot?
That was a reboot. Same characters, similar story, only much more terrible the second time.
I don't know. It kind of sounds like it's a remake. Okay, anyway,
What, Ghostbusters?
No, Total Recall. Or are these terms being used interchangeably?
It depends. Sometimes a remake can feed into an extended universe that's built from the same place. I don't know. I don't feel like they are exactly the same, even though, yeah, they are. They are used interchangeably in media all the time. And that kind of bums me out. So I would say in this case, this is clearly a reboot because there was a pre-existing franchise and mythology for this property. There were a couple Ghostbusters animated series. There's been comic books. There's a video game. There's 2 films. There's a lot of stuff to draw upon. And this movie says, yeah, no, fuck that. We're going to start from scratch.
What's also with this being a reboot and people saying, oh, this is my childhood ruined. I don't think that
people
this was...
say that about everything, though.
Well, and that's the other problem.
Well,
what I was going to say is that this reboot and a lot of reboots aren't made for the previous generations, even though we're all into nostalgia right now. It's made It's made for the future generation. This Ghostbusters movie is going to be the Ghostbusters movie of children, the children right now.
Yeah,
and the
totally.
Teenagers right now. That's what they're going to remember. Like, how many kids, 20-somethings think of the Colin Farrell Total Recall? Go back to this movie, Colin Farrell Total Recall as the actual Total Recall.
I don't think anybody thinks of that as anything, hopefully, because it's a terrible film and it needs to be ignored.
Or same thing with the RoboCop that came out, too.
Okay, I actually did like the new RoboCop, but maybe the whole point here is, I don't know, most reboots don't really bother me that much. For some reason, because all these people are talking about, oh, my childhood's ruined. It's like, you still have those DVDs, you still have those Blu-rays, they're not going anywhere. If you see in a movie and you hate it, then be like, I can't believe they made this crap. And then go home and watch the same one you already have.
Yeah, I just think that people are disguising the fact that they're just so appalled that they rebooted Ghostbusters or beloved Ghostbusters. To disguise the fact that, I think it's also about the women being leads. Because there have been some nasty comments online about Ghostbusters with four women instead of men, and it's getting people in an uproar.
Well, people nowadays just like to get in an uproar about anything. But I was thinking about this the other day, and I think there's actually a sort of an X factor when it comes to the Ghostbusters franchise. Because you know how a lot of these movies, they'll just announce, oh, we're doing a remake, and then it'll happen a couple years later, and then boom, it's out, and that's the end of it. With Ghostbusters, there's been a Ghostbusters 3 in development for, I don't know, 20 years or something in some form. Where,
I guess they realized it wasn't going to happen.
Well, I mean, I'll mention that in a second, but you know, it's for so many years, Ghostbusters fans, and that movie meant a lot to a lot of people, including me. I had, you know, the firehouse, I had all the toys, I watched the show.
Plus, you now got the extra cooler in the fridge.
Yeah, I had the proton pack and all that stuff. So I mean, I understand people that are like, Ghostbusters was important to my childhood and my life, so I get that. But I think they've had the carrot of Ghostbusters 3 dangled in front of them for so many years that for that not only not to happen, but to just be, you know, that whole franchise to be totally dashed in favor of a fresh start, I think that really pissed some people off. In addition to, you know, maybe there is some sexism involved, but except for probably a minority group of that is just like really, and I mean minority group as in a smaller group of people in the fan base, not minority like black people really hate Ghostbusters. So, I think for a lot of people that might even be subconscious. Like, it's like, I don't know why this really bothers me, but it very upsets me because it's not, you know, because they are taking such a radical shift with it. So
Yeah.
do you think that maybe that long development process for Ghostbusters 3 that never happened, and we kept hearing about Bill Murray shredded up the script and sent it to Dan Aykroyd, and it was like, nobody wants to see a bunch of fat Ghostbusters?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. And I mean, clearly this franchise means so much to Dan Aykroyd. And
Well, because he
Jason
gets paid if he produces it. I mean, that's bottom line it.
And it's Ivan Reitman is the one that did the original Ghostbusters.
Directed the first two,
okay,
yeah.
because I just want to make sure I don't get confused with his son.
No, his son is way too young for that.
Right. But Dan Aykroyd and Ivan Reitman, this franchise means so much to the both of them that I think it was also their own desire to bring this back to the big screen in any way that they could. And the fact that those two men and the director, who's a man, brought it to the big screen with four very funny ladies goes to show, you know, they're definitely for progress, and they were, you know, and they were fine with, and they wanted that type of change. So shouldn't we be supportive of that as an audience, that even men behind the scenes who had the greatest power to bring this movie alive wanted that to be the case?
Yeah, see, this is why I wanted to make sure you were on this podcast, to provide the ladies' perspective on some of this. Good. Yeah, I mean, no, I agree with you. And my whole problem with this movie going in, and we're sort of building up to our general reaction of the film, and then we'll break it down a little more from there. But my whole problem with this was the marketing wasn't particularly strong. The trailers weren't very funny to me. And I didn't really have much exposure to Kate McKinnon or Leslie Jones prior to this. So I was just going and being like, all right, well, the guy that did Bridesmaids and the two major stars for Bridesmaids, I guess it's Bridesmaids with ghosts. But, you know, I knew that they weren't going to go for such a hard R rating and that kind of gross out humor, because Ghostbusters is inherently a family-friendly franchise. So, you know, I've kind of talked a little bit about how much Ghostbusters meant to me and how much I love that franchise. So where were you coming from going into this movie?
I agree with you. I think the marketing was, well, at least the first trailer was pretty bad. I was confused, and I heard so was Melissa McCarthy, on why they showed the Ghostbusters from, you know, 1984 to then saying 30 years later. And it makes you think they're part of the same time frame, but then when they're starting to introduce the paranormal and the original Ghostbusters had nothing to do with this one, it's confusing. And then the trailers kind of started to streamline a little bit more and made it look a little bit more funny. But I think they just didn't use very good jokes either in the trailer.
Yeah.
It made it look like it was
I think
stupid.
that's a flaw that a lot of Paul Feig's movies have. If you watch the trailer for Spy or The Heat or even Bridesmaids, like those trailers aren't particularly funny.
Like Spy, it makes it look like Melissa McCarthy's making fun of her weight all the time. And
Yeah,
she
yeah.
actually barely does.
I don't know. There's something about his sense of humor that I don't think studios really know how to market. You know, and with those other films, I just assumed it was because, well, it's R-rated content, so, you know, they don't want to show like the really, you know, gross out or like crass humor because it's going to have F-bombs all over the place. But with Ghostbusters, you knew that wasn't the case. So I was like, well, what's going on? Is it just not funny or what? But I mean, I was a fan of those three movies that, you know, that we just mentioned. So I kind of went into this with a little bit of, you know, cautious optimism. especially being such a huge Ghostbusters fan. I don't understand these people that love something so much that they want to see the new version suck so badly. I don't understand that mindset.
Yeah, no, that doesn't make sense.
That's really stupid. And I agree with you. I would have liked to have seen this been, embrace the past and move forward from that, sort of like Creed or Force Awakens, where they sort of dust off this program that's been in like collecting mothballs for 20 plus years, and they're like, we could do this, blah blah blah, and then it would have had a cool meta commentary about women taking stuff and taking a project and building on it on their own, proving that they could do it just as well as men, or that sort of the subtext going on.
Right.
Which I guess is sort of there because we all know that the originals had men, but I mean, they could have made that more literal, which would have been an interesting twist on it.
Right. Well, especially since they kept calling back the original Ghostbusters over.
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there. For now, just, let the people know what were your thoughts on the first two movies before this? Like, were you a huge Ghostbusters fan? Were you like, I don't care about this at all?
I mean, I liked Ghostbusters okay. I didn't see the first one until you actually showed it to me. I know.
Blasphemy.
I know. The Ghostbusters I grew up on was Ghostbusters 2, which I'm finding out now everybody thinks Ghostbusters 2 is terrible. But that's the one I grew up on. That's the one I watched at my friend's house. And that's one I liked and scared me when I was younger. So
Vigo the Carpathian did it to you?
Yeah, he did. Ah. He was creepy.
Yeah, he was creepy.
So that's the Ghostbusters that I know. And I liked them okay. I thought they were really fun characters. But no, I didn't have the same connection to them that you did.
So you had a little bit more of a objective viewpoint going into this one.
I mean, it was hard. It was hard
Well, minus all the controversy that you heard about it.
I was thinking...
You thought it was going to be terrible, too.
I kind of did, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to think negatively, but I'm also not a movie critic like you are, so, as a film
Well, you're
critic,
on a podcast, so technically you are.
Right, well, as a film critic for you, this is what you actually do.
Sort of.
You don't want to go into a movie thinking it's going to suck. You want to think every movie's going to be great.
Right.
Or else why spend an hour and a half to 2 hours, sometimes longer than that, to watch a movie.
Yeah, I mean, you try and go in, just clear your mind of everything you've heard and just let the movie wash over you, and sometimes it's really great and sometimes it's not so much. And on the next episode, I'm actually going to get into some of my, best and worst of the year up to this point. But, I mean, generally speaking, what did you think of the movie? Like, we'll go broad view of, did we like it or not like it, and then we'll get into more specifics.
I liked it. It wasn't the best movie of the year to me, but it definitely was not as bad as critics made it sound. But I liked it. I thought it was really fun, and I felt inspired watching those women kick ass. Like, it was awesome. And I thought the ghosts were fun, and actually it's more scary than the first Ghostbusters and the second Ghostbusters. And I know it was CGI, but technology's come a long way in 30 years. So I thought the CGI was fine, and I liked it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually like it, and I had on my notes to talk about this later, but I'll just throw it out there now. I actually liked it better than Ghostbusters 2. I don't think it lives up to the original one. I think that in a lot of ways that script is a lot sharper. The jokes land more often. The narrative and the the characters are more defined, that kind of thing. I do feel, and we were talking about this the other day, I do feel that Paul Feig's sort of style of comedy, which does work on throughout, sort of makes a disjoint throughout some of the plot developments, and we can get into that in a second. But I mean, for the most part, I would probably give this a 3.5 out of 5. In fact, I already did on Letterboxd. So
we are both on Letterboxd, by the way.
Yes, we are. If you want to follow us on Letterboxd and see our ratings on movies. So I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. It's not going to make my top 10 of the year, but it's a vast improvement over something like Independence Day Resurgence, which was a
total bore,
like a shit show. But just going into a little more specifics, since there's such a vocal contingent, rallying against this movie, I figured let's just start with the negative stuff and get that out of the way first. So I was talking about the trailers earlier, and I do feel like the worst jokes were probably in the trailers, like the "Get out of my friend Ghost" and the possession scene there, and Kate McKinnon with the wig. Was it the wig or the hat? And some of that, I feel like some of the lamest jokes were actually the ones in the trailers. Would you agree with that?
I would. Yes.
Okay.
But the thing is, though, I don't even know if I actually thought the movie was funny, per se.
It was funny in a smiley way, not in a ha ha ha.
Yeah. I don't think
it wasn't as outrageous. It wasn't as outrageous.
Right.
Let me take a second in this. It wasn't as outrageous as Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates, which we were talking about earlier. It's a different kind of. It's not supposed to be a straight out comedy. It's a comedy, horror, sci-fi, action, whatever. It's a blender of multiple genres. That's what Ghostbusters has always been. I mean, the first one was more comedy and less action. I feel like this movie actually balanced it out a little bit more between there's some thrilling sequences and and comedic ones as well. But I mean, I will say going in, the first 10 to 15 minutes were a little slow just to get into it, as I was sort of letting all the controversy sort of slip to the background. And that opening scene with the tour guide at we should say spoilers. Shit, I forgot to say that up front. We should say spoilers for Ghostbusters from this point on. But the opening scene with the tour guide at that manor or mansion or wherever he was at, that was really lame. I didn't really find any of the stuff he was saying very funny, and the humor was so over the top that I felt kind of desperate, where he's saying like, oh, this is where P.T. Barnum sat and came up with the idea to enslave elephants. I'm like, okay, I get you're making a little social commentary joke there.
Maybe that was improv.
But that wasn't funny. It wasn't funny. It felt really flat, and I was sort of already kind of on guard and thinking, oh man, if this is how the comedy is going to be, this is going to be rough to get through.
You didn't think the part with the stairs was scary?
Yeah, the last moment, the scream and the which kind of called to mind a little bit of the first movie, where the ghost showed up there. But other than that, I mean, that opening sequence was sort of hard for me. What about you? What are your some of your?
I think the jokes were kind of lame, but it was just the opener. But I was a little scared on what was happening.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, it's ghosts. But so the last minute or so right before the credits started rolling, it kind of actually creeped me out a little bit. I'll say it.
Okay. So I will say that we were talking about the sexist controversy around this, and I did think, I mean, it's funny that everybody was so pissed off about the way they were changing things and social commentary behind like the switch on the reboot, making it all women and all that. But I will say that the fact that the movie was, as you were saying earlier, trying to be progressive. The fact that they took the one black character and made her an MTA worker who's not a scientist, who's loud and borderline obnoxious at times, I felt that was really a step backwards. I don't know why they couldn't have made Leslie Jones, given her a little bit of a meatier part to deal with, as opposed to like, oh, I saw some shit, guys. I'm part of the club. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And they didn't have to do exactly the same thing from the first movie, where they have, 3 white men and then 1 black man. They didn't have to do just
gender swap. Yeah, the exact same race, the exact same white black race balance.
Right, but the thing is though that we kept trying. At least I kept trying to see what personalities fit with the male Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I was sure. I'm glad.
I couldn't do it.
That made me happy though. They didn't do like a clear, Kate McKinnon is the Bill Murray, and then Kristen Wiig is the Egon, and they didn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, so they were all their own personalities, and I think that all the actresses made those characters kind of like themselves a little bit. Yeah,
more well developed than a lot of people were expecting. And we'll get into that when we get into more of the positive stuff down the line. But how did you feel about the villain and the actor who played him and all of that?
I thought he was boring. I think he was trying too hard to play it creepy, and it just didn't really do it for me.
Yeah, because his scheme about, setting these devices throughout the city to awaken the dead, essentially, and kind of like incite an apocalypse, I thought that was that was kind of interesting. But his motivations behind doing it is like, oh, people picked on me in school and blah blah blah.
So I'm gonna rule the ghosts.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take over the ghosts, I guess, and then his little ranting notebook and all that.
And I didn't understand why he was like the only ghost that could change forms the way that he did.
Yeah.
Yet none of the other ghosts seemed like they had enough brains or ghost power to do that.
But then again, this is the thing that some people don't realize, and I told you this off air before, but people that'll criticize this movie being like, oh, the mythology doesn't make sense, these ghosts just whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, the mythology of Ghostbusters has never made sense. Sigourney Weaver had portal to another dimension in her refrigerator, and then in the second one is
in her bathtub.
Her bathtub like attacked. I mean, none of it's not supposed to make sense. It's a comedy with crazy shit happening, and they make jokes about it. That's what it is. It's not like Star Wars where everything's gonna be mapped out. They're gonna write a bazillion novels explaining it all. It's just supernatural phenomena that it just happens and isn't necessarily explained or grounded in any kind of reality. Yes, exactly. Yeah, totally.
So it's not really necessarily. It's sci-fi and fantasy.
Yeah, and horror. That's what I mean. It's a blender of different genres.
Wow. Wonder what drugs they were doing in 1984.
1984, and then just the 80s. Cocaine in the 80s, no?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
A lot of that. Well, wasn't that the whole thing, to tangent for a second, but wasn't that the whole thing, like, in the 80s, that you'd see all these reports of the receipts of, like, the Blues Brothers set, and it was, like, all the cocaine that they spent money on and shit?
Yeah. Yeah, that movie was Blues Brothers with Dan Aykroyd.
Dan Aykroyd, exactly. So that explains that. But honestly, I feel like the biggest issue with this movie was that there was just too much nostalgia, which is ironic because everybody's like, don't fuck with my Ghostbusters, I want the old Ghostbusters back. But then by injecting so much of the old Ghostbusters into this movie, it became kind of distracting.
Right, because the movie wasn't able to stand on its own as much.
Well, yeah, because every 2 seconds, the four ladies are having they're having chemistry, and then the plot is moving forward and things are looking good, and then they're like, oh, here's Bill Murray for some reason. Oh, here's Dan Aykroyd for some reason. So was your thing
more the cameos compared to them with the logo and with the car? I thought those were more like subtly inserted.
I don't know how subtle they were. They were pretty.
Well, they
obvious,
were they wanted to keep the spirit alive.
They were cheesy. Like the logo scene in the subway station was really cheesy, but having seen the trailer, you knew where it was going, and you were like, oh, because and they're like, no ghost, and the guy like crosses it out. I was like, oh shit, I know exactly where this is going. That I actually thought was really cute. I didn't have an issue with that moment. I will say that the car showing up being named Ecto-1 without really, I don't think any mention of ectoplasm in this movie, which is the whole point of where they come up with Ecto. That was a little weird. The firehouse that they tease early on and they check it out and they're all ready to move in, sort of like the first one when Dan Aykroyd slides down the pole and he's like, this place is great, when can we move in, that kind of thing. Again, all excited, ready to go get his stuff. And then in this movie, having a similar scene, and Kristen Wiig is talking to the agent who actually you pointed out to me is what is her name,
Katie
Dippold, the co-screenwriter with Paul Feig. So that was kind of an interesting little cameo. And then her telling Kristen Wiig that the rent is like $21,000 a month or something, and then smash cut to them having this new space above a Chinese restaurant. I thought that was funny, and I thought that worked. I mean, like, sort of making it a little more realistic. Like, yeah, they can't afford this. They got no money. They just got laid off, or
yeah, that reminds me. So what was Kevin being paid with?
I don't know. He's dumb enough. You probably could have paid him in French fries or something. Yeah. We'll get to him in a second, but just for the main thrust of the movie to be so bogged down by so many of these callbacks was a little much, I feel. And I know you liked the Stay Puft one.
I did.
That was okay. That one's sort of in the middle ground for me. It didn't bother me, but it wasn't like, it didn't like excite me or anything either. And the cameos really annoyed the hell out of me. That was the most annoying one. Especially since I heard about all of them coming, and so I expected most of them to happen by a certain point in the movie, and then like Sigourney Weaver happened in the mid-credits scene, which really seemed out of nowhere, and I was just like, I don't know what this, why it's not there? What do I care about that scene?
I guess because it was important to Dan Aykroyd, and
I mean,
they put them in there, and I guess wasn't Bill Murray like a holdup for the cameos?
I don't know if he was a holdup for the cameos. He was a holdup as far as, I think, for the rights issues or something at one point, maybe. But his was the most pointless of all. It was most extended, and it was the most, like, it didn't really go anywhere. Because he plays, obviously, hopefully if you're listening to this, you've already seen the movie. But he plays a skeptic, sort of a famous ghost debunker. And he shows up there at their place, just sort of demanding proof. Kristen Wiig, of course, opens up one of the traps, and it flies out and killing Bill Murray's character, and then they just forget that ever happened. And you mentioned that to me yesterday, that it just like
there's no follow through. Like,
right.
At first with that scene, you have Kristen Wiig's character and Melissa McCarthy's character arguing back and forth about why that trap should or should not be opened, and it was finally settled okay, Kristen Wiig's character wasn't going to open up the trap. But then she did anyway because she really wanted to impress Bill Murray's cameo person, and then the ghost escapes. It was never mentioned again. Like Melissa McCarthy's character, no one lectured her, Kristen Wiig, about it or anything. It was over, forgotten.
And I think that kind of goes back to my issue with the cameos, is that they did feel sort of forced in there because, like, all right, well, we need to create a role for this person from the originals who wants to be in it. The only one that felt natural, the only two that felt natural to me were Annie Potts, especially since she was on the phone and she said, "What do you want?" just like she did in the Ghostbusters, the first one. That was great. And then Ernie Hudson showing up as Leslie Jones' uncle, which again, it was also a little weird. It's like, okay, well, we had a black person from the new one and a token black person from the old one. It's like, oh, they're related because all black people are related, right? I thought that was a little weird.
Right. And
it's like you couldn't give him another role, maybe switch something. I don't know
why Leslie Jones didn't even say something like this to Paul Feig.
I think she was probably just happy to be in a movie because as far as I'm concerned, she's never. I mean, she was in top 5 and some other movies.
I don't even remember what she.
I don't remember her. I don't remember that movie very well either. It was a decent movie though. Rosario Dawson. But this is definitely the highest profile movie she's ever been in for sure.
Oh yes.
And Kate McKinnon, which we'll get into in a second. But the firehouse thing, like the fact that they went back to that by the end of the movie, they end up in the firehouse anyway. I wish they hadn't done that because I sort of like the idea of this one sort of forging its own path and not being like, all right, we're gonna get the car. Mic issue. We're gonna get the car. We're gonna get the same headquarters as the original Ghostbusters because that's what you guys want to see, right? And that kind of bugged me.
I think it bugged you a little bit more than me.
Well, because I have
they already were doing everything like the original Ghostbusters.
Yeah, but
so
they were
why
going
not end it?
They were going off the track a little bit. I was going to mention later, but we'll do it now. About the gadgets and some of the new weapons they had. They were sort of developing, like using the original Ghostbusters as a starting point, and then developing it out from there as far as the technology, as far as the location. Because, like I said, they saw the firehouse and they were like, "Yeah, we can afford this," and moved on. So the fact that the movie doubled back and just had them in the firehouse anyway was a little disappointing. But we were talking earlier off air about Chris Hemsworth's character of Kevin. And about how the movie's been accused of sexism, but it's funny how it actually does have some sexism in it.
Right.
But flip the other way, where the token blonde bimbo just happens to be a man, as opposed to, in other movies like this, it would be the other way around.
Which is interesting, though, because in Ghostbusters 1 and 2, there wasn't any blonde bimbos.
No, it's just...
So the fact that they decided to insert that, I mean, it's comedic in its own way.
Right.
But it's also, that's not progressive. Why would we have blonde bimbos at all being mentioned in films to begin with?
Quality, everybody should be the same.
And it's a double standard to me where you have a Chris Hemsworth character that's being looked at as a piece of meat by Kristen Wiig's character. And it seems like that's totally acceptable. If you did that to a woman now in a film, you're going to have an uproar. People are going to be really upset about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know why that's okay to do that to a man.
This is why I had this listed in the negative section, because I think this upset you a little more than it did me, because the way I read it... You
didn't even bring it up.
Yeah, no, exactly. The way I read it is that was sort of the joke in and of itself, is that they gender swapped it and like, look how silly this is when it's the man that's an idiot. And then the women are like, hey, as opposed to the other way around. So I didn't mind that because
you're thinking it came from more of like, I mean, yeah, most likely it did come from more of like a comedic place instead of
almost like a social commentary about the movies in general and how these kinds of movies usually work by flipping that.
But what are the other social commentaries of this movie then?
Well, I mean
that's the only one I could think of.
Well, in the casting, in the casting of Chris Hemsworth.
Right, but I'm just meaning that what are the other social commentaries of this movie? I mean, I guess
it's Ghostbusters. It's not like mired in social commentary.
Right. Well, that's why I didn't, I thought it was interesting that they chose the blonde bimbo stereotype to insert in this film when the previous Ghostbusters didn't have it in there at all.
Right. And a lot of people's issues with this movie are that every guy in this movie is either an idiot or an asshole. Like, there's no, think about it. There's no men in this movie that have 2 brain cells to put together. There's the mayor, there's an asshole, there's the bad guy who's an asshole, there's Chris Hemsworth who's an idiot, and then there's the Chinese delivery guy who's an idiot.
Can't even get the order right.
Exactly. Even though they're like upstairs. It takes them an hour to get there still.
Right.
So that, I don't know, maybe it's an unfortunate side effect of just, the way that Paul Feig approached this project and wanted to make the women look so powerful and good that he felt like he had to make all the men around them like incompetent.
Well, let me ask you
and
this:
sort of ill-intentioned.
What movie has he done where the men are actually portrayed in a positive light?
Chris O'Dowd's character in Bridesmaids.
Okay.
Jason Statham's character in Spy
was an idiot, though. He was all like, "Look at me." I mean, he was hilarious.
Wasn't an asshole, and he was.
Yes, he was. He was an asshole. He was trying to always show.
He was okay. So maybe Paul Feig's thing is making the men look like fools.
I think that's his thing.
I don't have a problem. I'm a man. I'm a man, and I thought Jason Statham was the best part of that movie.
Well, yeah, you can.
I don't remember in the Heat. I don't remember the Heat. Like, wasn't that the one where Thomas F. Wilson, the guy from Back to the Future, wasn't he the boss? And he's like, "Look at me. I'm 37 years old or whatever like that."
Yeah, and they're all the men in that movie are assholes or idiots.
I guess
if I remember correctly.
I mean, is it sexist? Probably towards men. But I'm a white male and I don't mind, so I'll allow it.
I know.
It's whatever.
It's just gotta stop being sexist.
Well, I'm not saying that more of that, please. I'm not advocating for it. But at the same time, it didn't bother me or detract from this movie in any way.
Well, as a white male, you've definitely had your advantages through
exactly.
the course of your life. So.
Exactly. So if movies want to make fun of us or characters that are played by, white male actors, if they get their humor out of that, that's fine.
But that is the last group that actually can be made fun of now.
I guess, yeah.
And that's why movies and TV are latching onto that, because you got to make fun of somebody. So why not a white man and make them look stupid?
Although, now is probably a good time to shift over into the positive stuff.
Yes.
I will say that even though Chris Hemsworth was pretty funny in this movie, I think Kate McKinnon was the clear standout.
I agree.
I feel like Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy were doing their Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy things. And therefore, there wasn't really anything particularly fresh or new in their performances, even though they were good, because they're very competent actresses and they're very funny. And, I didn't have any issue with them. In fact, initially when I heard about the cast of this movie, my first thought was, well, Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy, that's sort of the obvious thing, like if you're going to cast a funny woman in a movie. So if anything, I was more skeptical of not having more imaginative casting decisions, like as I heard rumored Emma Stone, I heard rumored Anna Faris, I heard rumored Mindy Kaling, who I know you like now, love so much.
And she even mentioned in her book, too, that she would love to have a reboot of, this is in the trivia of IMDb as well, that she would have loved to see a reboot of Ghostbusters with her and then 3 other women. I think she even mentioned Tina Fey for her.
Tina Fey would have been another good choice,
What about
too.
Amy Schumer? Amy Schumer's been blowing up, and she's like the latest funny comedian. But
Amy Poehler, you could name like a bunch of funny women that would have worked for this.
But I think that Amy Poehler and Tina Fey would have been more suitable, because it seemed like this is like more of an older group. Amy Schumer, Emma Stone, they're a little too young.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that.
To be, because these are all Ghostbusters are also accomplished too.
Yeah, and
in their own way.
3 out of the 4 of these female stars are in their 40s too. Which now makes me look ageist, the fact that I'm saying the young person's the best one, guys.
Oh, that's not what I thought you were saying.
I know, that's what it makes me sound like, though. But I thought Kate McKinnon was the freshest voice in this movie. We already mentioned earlier some of our issues with Leslie Jones and her performance. Even though she was fine, I didn't have issues with her. It did seem like the portrayal there was a little lacking in depth and a little underdeveloped. But Kate McKinnon was,
and that was more the fault of the writers.
Right, yeah. That's why I don't hold it against.
Feig.
Yeah, that's why, and Katie Dippold. That's why I don't hold it against Leslie Jones. Like, it was nothing that she did or didn't do that made this character not as successful. It's just the way that character was written. But as far as Kate McKinnon, I feel like she brought so much more to it than is actually even on the page. Because every scene she's doing a silly face, or saying something really weird, or dancing around to Rhythm of the Night by DeBarge, which now every time I hear that song, I'm going to think of that. Just like Pocket Full of Sunshine always makes me think of Easy A. And to a certain extent, it was almost borderline distracting. Like during the movie, it did kind of ring some bells for me, like be thinking that she's from SNL and this is her first like real big movie. So it's almost like she's acting like this is an SNL sketch. Like, even though the camera's on the other people, like she feels like she's in front of a live studio audience a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And because of that, her performance was more heightened and over the top and made her seem even stranger by comparison.
Right. But it's, it's her first film. And I think that she also went in there feeling like she had a lot to prove.
It's her first film in this capacity. She's been small roles here and there, but not like this, not where she's on a poster and stuff.
But she's going to be a breakout star now because of this movie.
Yeah, she is.
She's gonna blow up. And I know that now she's one of your favorite girls.
Yeah, she is. She's under my protection.
But yeah, I thought she was really good and funny. And I mean, I agree with you. It could have almost gone distracting, but it didn't.
Yeah, and the chemistry between the four of them was really good in general. Like, I thought we know Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig worked well together in Bridesmaids, so that's no big surprise. But the four of them just, like, gelled really well together. I believe that they were friends. I believe that they don't start as friends, but I believe that they had this common goal and they sort of worked together. And I don't know, that sort of worked for me. They had a lot of fun. Making the movie. Yeah, totally.
And you could tell. You could tell that through, their chemistry and just... And that's actually why I don't think the movie was necessarily funny per se. I think what the magic was about the film was the chemistry between all of them and how much fun they were having. And it, kind of made me feel like I was having fun too, just watching it. So, it's a pass for the Bechdel test.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about this movie is that there are four women in it, and they're not talking about a man in every scene, and I don't think they are hardly ever, except for when they hire Kevin, really, or Rowan. They're talking about taking him down or whatever. But there were a lot of scenes in this movie where it wasn't them talking about, about men, and it definitely was nobody had a love interest or anything like that. You know what I mean? It wasn't like a romantic comedy like, oh, there's women in it, so it's got to be all lovey-dovey.
Ghostbusters, they did.
Yeah, the previous, the first one or the second? Well, both of them, I guess. Bill Murray and Sigourney Weaver, yeah. So it kind of had no choice but to pass that's a tongue twister, but to pass the Bechdel test, which unfortunately it'll probably be one of the only major movies this year, like major studio blockbuster type movies, to do so, because that is so rare. I mean, I saw a stat in a magazine recently that only 8 out of the top 100 highest grossing, domestic releases have sole female protagonists in the front, like headlining them. And 4 of them were Hunger Games movies. And then 2 of them were animated. And the other one was Gravity. I don't even remember what the last one was. So the fact that that's so rare and that this movie pulls off at least that aspect of it so well is definitely a triumph.
Right. So I think that was good of the screenwriters to want to make it with the chemistry with the women and have it pass the Bechdel test. And so that was good on that.
And I liked all the meta comments throughout the film of, they put up these videos because they're, we're in the YouTube generation. So, of course, in this movie, every time they're confronting a ghost, they're filming it and they're putting it up on YouTube being like, look, we saw a ghost, ghosts are real, and that kind of thing. And all the comments are just like tearing them down. And, I think Paul Feig has acknowledged in interviews, if I'm not speaking out of turn. Okay, he's acknowledged that was intended to be sort of, about the reaction to the movie.
I don't know about that. I just do know that he was asked for comment about people's response to all being female-led and how people were so upset about it. And he's just like, I don't even remember what he said, but he did speak about that side of it. But I guess he clearly has psychic ability because he knew what people were going to say when he was writing the script.
This is the most disliked. You know how on YouTube you can like and dislike videos, right? This is like the most disliked video on YouTube, I think, or trailer, like it's up there. Thousands and thousands of people being like, fuck this shit.
And a lot of reviews, as you Steven saying, like, oh, the trailers are terrible, and
the trailers did look terrible, but that doesn't mean the movie is.
Yeah, I think the problem with a lot of the reviews is that people literally went in there thinking it was going to be terrible and were just not going to change their mind.
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's a big part of it. But the YouTube comments throughout really made me giggle, especially the first one, which lends this episode its title, Ain't No Bitches Gonna Hunt No Ghosts. In case you guys, obviously you could tell that we like this movie for the most part. That title is clearly not indicative of our opinion. That really made me laugh. I was like, that's exactly what someone on the internet would say.
Yeah. And then, there was that comment from Melissa McCarthy's character. She's like, you can't pay attention. You can't care what people write at night or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly.
That got
And
a
they're at
response
night
from
in their
the-
basement or
from the
whatever.
audience, yeah.
Yeah.
Got a reaction. And actually, we had a very interactive audience.
Yeah, they were really responding to it. I mean,
Yeah.
granted, we saw this at a previous screening with a bunch of people that are seeing the movie for free. So, like, unless you show them, like, someone on screen kicking puppies or something, they're gonna applaud at the end and be like, "This is amazing!" But even so, they were responding.
People were reacting. Like whenever with the YouTube comments, people were applauding, and there were some other things that happened in the film that people behind us were like, "Yeah," and
it was so cool because the people behind us in the theater was a couple of parents, and then I think they had 2 little kids, and they were talking about the original movies because I was only assumed that they recently introduced them to the original movies. So because of this movie, little kids now have an interest in Ghostbusters. They're going to seek out those old films. They're going to watch these new ones. Little girls can now look up and be like, look, I can be a Ghostbuster too.
Exactly. That's what I was saying, that reboots are not for previous generations. They are designed for future, now, present, and future generations.
And a lot of the combat scenes toward the end, the action, I thought that was really neat. When I'm talking about the ghosts are invading the city.
Oh yeah, that was one of my favorite parts.
Well, and all the devices and them fighting, and Kate McKinnon has her moment there to kind of shine. And I don't know, I told you this, and I'm just gonna say it here. I don't know, something about that moment with them fighting the ghosts. It was the Kate McKinnon moment specifically, and the music kind of took me right back to being a little kid and watching the original movies. And I got a little touched. I got a little choked up. Something that I love so much coming back, and whatever form, men, women, who cares? I don't really care about that. But coming back and like starting over and like being brought back in such a major way into the spotlight, that really hit me in a lot, in the heart. And later on, towards the very end of the movie, when they're looking out of the city, and all the people are like are saying from the sides of their buildings that we love Ghostbusters, thank you Ghostbusters, whatever, all that stuff. I thought that was great. That was really moving. And the fact that the whole crux of the film emotionally hinges on the friendship between Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy's characters, I thought really worked. Where she leaps into that other dimension to save her friend and stuff. I thought that really worked, especially since the movie starts with that friendship being fractured, and then by the end, the over the course of the film, them fighting ghosts together and solving this mystery, they sort of reignite that friendship, and she's like willing to like sacrifice herself to save her friend. I thought that was really powerful. The friendship between 2 women, which you don't see on screen like that unless it's a romantic comedy, and she has a friend who she wants to talk, like Meg Ryan has a friend she wants to talk to about Tom Hanks and that kind of shit.
Right. Yeah. No. That was a good scene.
And it, with all the technology and everything, it leaves a lot of room for the franchise to grow going forward.
Right. And I like that Kate McKinnon's character was the kind of like the scientist behind all of it. I mean, even though the 2 others were scientists too, but she was she was like the electron particle expert or something. And so I like that she was kind of like the genius, but also a wacky.
Well,
genius.
she's sort of like a mad scientist type of vibe to her, which made her even more fun to watch. And I agree with you. She's going to be a huge star after this. We're going to hear in the next couple of weeks, Kate McKinnon like joining all these projects because everybody's like wants to work with her.
But that also, I kind of feel like what happened with Kristen Wiig when
after
Bridesmaids. Yeah, because she was in films before that, but Bridesmaids, boom.
Even more than Kristen Wiig, Melissa McCarthy got an Oscar nomination for that.
Yeah.
That's a comedy. You never get Oscar nominations for
comedies. And I didn't even know who she was. I know that she was.
I'd heard of her because of that Mike and Molly show, but that's about it.
She looked so different, though, in Bridesmaids than she did in Mike and Molly.
Yeah.
So, and also she's Jenny McCarthy's cousin, in case you all didn't know that.
Hence the name.
Yeah, so sometimes comedies can either be your breakout or break you. So I hope to see that.
Well, Paul Feig has, for the most part, has really kind of brought some actors into the spotlight in big ways, as you mentioned with Bridesmaids, and then I feel
Look what happened with Rose Byrne too from Bridesmaids.
Yeah, well, I feel like Spy actually gave her more to work with comedically. I feel like Spy is a Melissa McCarthy movie, but I feel like it was really Jason Statham and Rose Byrne that were like, look at how awesome these 2 people are. You know what I mean? Yes. And for Ghostbusters, I feel like that was Kate McKinnon's moment. Maybe Leslie Jones to a lesser extent because mainstream audiences might not be as familiar with her. But I feel like it was really, hey, look at these people, look how great they are. Put them in more stuff. And I'm sure Paul Feig will, I like to think he'd come back for a sequel, but we'll get to, we'll talk about, where we want to see the franchise go in a second. So did the special effects work for you as far as, remaining true to the original look, but then sort of modernizing it for the CG era? Because
Yeah, I think
those
so.
were a lot of stop motion and that kind of thing back in the day.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we actually saw a scene to one of the Ghostbusters today, I think, with Slimer, and he looks so different in those movies compared to this movie that the CG has come a long way. Well, CG wasn't even around. The effects have come a really long way since then, and yeah, it looks a little cheesy in some parts. Okay, like in the beginning where they have the green is breaking out from the floor, it looks kind of cheesy, but it worked for me, and I think that they made the ghost actually scarier than the first one.
Yeah. I will say that I think that one of the best uses of special effects was actually in that mannequin sequence.
Oh, yeah.
One of the best and creepiest and most surprising, because Ghostbuster movies, you're used to seeing the ghost be like this giant dragon thing.
And they go
or Slimer, this giant blob of whatever with little arms.
And they changed the way the ghosts function. Like, the ghosts didn't really go through stuff. They went on stuff. So, like, in the first...
Well, they went through stuff in the originals.
No, what I mean is like, when Winston's in the subway tunnel, and the subway goes like right through him.
Oh, okay.
Compared to now, like with the character with the ghost that was in the subway tunnel, it went on the train. It didn't go through the train, and it didn't go through people. It went in them.
The rules of the Ghostbusters franchise have always been sort of loose. Like, there's no way to put together like, an encyclopedia of like, this is the rule, this is how the world of Ghostbusters works, because there isn't one. They pretty much sort of play it by ear, and whatever happens, which goes back to your point earlier about Rowan's powers just sort of being like manifesting out of nowhere, and for some reason he can shapeshift and all this stuff. It's different because in Ghostbusters 1, that was clear callback to Ghostbusters 1, and Gozer, taking the form of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Right, yes, and then you have then you have it where ghosts are going through people instead of necessarily possessing them.
Right.
And that's possession, that's kind of more of a demon.
It's also 9/10 of the law.
Yeah.
So they say.
Yeah, so there was a lot more possession in this movie than the previous ones. But they wanted to do a different spin on it, so.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out before we moved on, to the final battle with Rowan, I wanted to point out that I did love the whole mannequin sequence gave Leslie Jones one of the best lines in the movie, which I'd forgotten until I read somewhere else, where she sees the room of all the like mannequins, and she's like, "Oh, room full of nightmares? Yeah, I'm not going in there."
Yeah,
that was hilarious. Line. So she did have some, we were saying earlier about how she's not necessarily like the standout, but she did have some really great moments in there. That did make me want to see her and stuff. And I mean, I'm not saying she's terrible and she should get her out of this franchise. She was good. I need more from her. Like, you sold me on Kate McKinnon. The other two, of course, we already love and everything. Well, not everything, but like Paul Feig movies at least. So I need a little more Leslie Jones to really get 100% behind that character. But I had an interesting thought regarding, Rowan turning into the logo and then like sort of a perverse version of the logo. And I'm not 100% supportive of the idea that, okay, the first movie ended with a giant character that's like all white storming the city, and then they take him down, and then they do this. They basically the exact same thing here.
There were a lot of similarities, definitely.
Yeah, that sort of annoyed me. That was a little bit of one of the nostalgic nods. I was like, okay, come on, seriously?
Oh, and then no, and I actually just thought of this. So the Ghostbusters logo gets all big and scary, and then his face burns on the side. That makes me think of a marshmallow. Yeah. Going on a s'more.
Yeah, I know. I thought that too. They do that to Stay Puft. They burn part of him.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah. And so I don't like that idea. I just hope that it is a little bit like The Force Awakens, where they're relaunching this brand, and so they're like, all right, we know this is sort of like the Death Star, but we're just bringing it back, and then from this point on, we'll go somewhere new. So
that's actually a really fair analogy.
Because of that, I'm cutting Paul Feig some slack. I'm like, all right, I love The Force Awakens, so I can't be like, they can do it, but you can't, because that's not fair.
Right, and I think that in a way that those Paul Feig and J.J. Abrams did that just so you can get more brought into loving those films, and then try to kind of start over. And didn't Star Trek? Didn't Star Trek in 2009 do something kind of similar too?
2009 didn't have as many of those blatant like rehashes. I feel like Into Darkness had way more of those. I mean, with the point with the con and all that stuff.
Yeah. So okay, well,
which wasn't which and that was the second one. They didn't really need to do that at that point. I feel like that was a little silly, and that one is a little more worthy of criticism because they already successfully relaunched it. It's not like they were using those elements to to draw in audiences old and new for this new version. They already done that, and yet they still I don't know, didn't want to come up with anything new, so they just reversed the the climactic moment in the Wrath of Khan for their version. But I did think that it was interesting how Rowan turns into the logo, right?
Right.
And then the logo gets all big and scary and starts storming the city. And I don't know, I sort of like the poetry of that being symbolic of Paul Feig and his lady Ghostbusters, and I'm not being sexist when I say that, because clearly I like this movie. Battling, almost like symbolic of them battling the past. Like battling the old films and being like, we could stand on our own. Because they're literally fighting with the logo from the original movies.
Then you know what? Maybe that is what the whole purpose of it was.
I don't know if I'm reading too much into it or what, but for me, that's how I sold myself on the idea of being okay with Rowan turning into the logo, basically.
I think you're right. I think that's actually a really good point. And, I mean, they were already copying all these things from the original, from the first two Ghostbusters. So I do think it was all intentional to try to welcome a whole new fan base and an older fan base.
Right, like I was saying,
right.
Like Force Awakens did the exact same thing. Force Awakens has so many similarities to A New Hope that it is sort of quasi-remake / reboot / sequel. So I guess my issue with this movie is I don't mind so much the reboot and remake elements. I just wish they had also thrown in some sequel elements and acknowledged that other stuff had happened.
Right.
That was my issue.
But didn't you have a theory?
I did. I didn't have a theory. It's something that I wanted to. I was just thought of yesterday and was throwing it out there on Twitter. I would love it if in the sequel to this, the ladies found out that the Ghostbusters have existed in alternate dimensions, just like across the board. Like there's, if you take the whole multiverse theory, that there's all these parallel dimensions where, things could be either slightly different or radically different. But I like the idea that in all the parallel dimensions, there are some form of Ghostbusters, and that the ghosts consistently face the Ghostbusters. And it's like sort of like a mortal battle of good and evil that's destined to continue on and on throughout eternity and all the different parallel dimensions. And I wouldn't require the original cast to come back again in their same roles or any of that. I would just like a little like tease that Ghostbusters have existed elsewhere. And then, they formed this whole production company of Ghost Corps to make a shared Ghostbusters universe. Then you can make all these Ghostbusters movies. They don't have to be related. They don't have to maintain any mythology. It doesn't have to be like the Marvel thing where you're building up to something. They could just be different versions of Ghostbusters that are existing on parallel dimensions. They don't have to be origin stories. They could just be. And, sort of take it from there, different characters being Ghostbusters. Almost like, imagine an initial team of Ghostbusters I think this was an early version of Ghostbusters 3. And then they start the Ghostbusters franchise, or they start the Ghostbusters team, and then they franchise it out. So that then there's Ghostbusters teams all over. There's different Ghostbusters divisions. Sort of like that, but across dimensions as opposed to cities. Or states, or countries, or whatever. Okay. I really like that idea. So I think that would be a good way to do that without feeling like, oh, we have to reference this other one.
Well, does it count that this film wasn't even actually filmed in New York?
Yeah, some people are pissed about that, and some people are annoyed that in the movie, I guess they have Papa John's pizza at one point. I didn't even notice that, and the whole critique that what real New Yorker orders Papa John's pizza? You order from like the pizza place.
That didn't even look like legit Papa John's. It looked like a rip-off Papa John's.
If that happened, I didn't even notice that. I guess I didn't notice that because I was paying attention to the movie, and it totally went over my head. But yeah, I mean that's a valid concern. I was born in Jersey, so nobody in New York orders like chain pizza unless they have no other option, really. before we go and start wrapping it up, I just wanted to throw out there, I really loved the Harold Ramis bust that's visible early on in the film in the university where Kristen Wiig is working, just right outside the office. There was a bust of Harold Ramis, who, in the film could be a professor or the founder of the university or whatever, doesn't matter. The fact that there was that little bit of visual iconography to acknowledge his passing.
So you're okay with that cameo?
Yeah, because it was silent and it was respectful, and they wanted to acknowledge. I guess it's almost like they wanted to acknowledge the complete set of Ghostbusters, but he sadly passed away before the movie was made, so it was a way of kind of giving him props without it being distracting and having him play a cab driver, being like, "I ain't afraid of no ghosts," and driving off like Dan Aykroyd did. And they did say at the end, for Harold and everything, and I thought that was really sweet. And actually, when the bus showed up, people were applauding. Like, people saw that and they applauded because they thought that was really, that was moving. For me and, for everybody else, I guess. So, for you, since I know the answer sort of to this, how did this rank with the first two movies to sort of wind things down?
Well, it's hard because they are all different films. This film is different than the first one, even though it got a lot of the same thing. But, I mean, I like this one a lot, but yeah, I think the original Ghostbusters is still better. And
yeah, it is.
And my personal preference is still the second one because that's one I grew up on.
That's your nostalgic favorite.
That's my nostalgic favorite.
Which is funny that of all this, all the people going into this are like, don't touch that original Ghostbusters. And you're like, you better leave Ghostbusters 2 alone. You're the one person saying that. And then in the Honest trailer, they had that great part about like all these people worried about the Ghostbusters reboot. That's going to ruin the franchise. I totally forgot about the movie that already ruined the franchise.
Yeah, they did everything the same as the first one.
Pretty much. And I told you, I rewatched both of them recently, and I was like, wow, first one totally holds up. The effects are a little dated in some of the moments with, like, the hell dogs, and it looks really badly, like, stop motion-y. Not in a cool way. I mean, like, in a sad way, where you're like, wow, I guess that was good at the time. And then I rewatched the second one. I was like, wow, this is not good at all. Like, it's not bad. I think right now I do have a 3.5 for that on Letterboxd as well, but that's a weaker 3.5 because this is to me a stronger movie. And I'm interested to see how people react to it. I mean, I'm sure the people that went in being like, this is gonna suck, cross their arms, watch the movie, they're like, this sucks. But I mean, if you compare this to something more recent than Ghostbusters that has a similar team-based fantasy sci-fi vibe, this is like leagues better than Pixels or something like that. That was a fucking mess. I thought this was actually really fun. Did it have its flaws? Yeah. But the cast made it work. There were enough jokes in here that were fun. There was a lot of room for the franchise to develop in the future. And I've told you that my dream sequel would be like a really diverse team of 6 people, since especially now that they've done this and they were now introduced some of these characters. The Avengers movies have proved that you can do a 6-person ensemble really well, 6-person team, and just make it super diverse. Men, women, straight, gay, black, white, Hispanic, Asian. Throw all that stuff in there. I think that would be, if you really want to avoid all the sexism and show that you're progressive, they would have had a co-ed team, a mixed race, mixed sexual orientation all together. Power Rangers
did that 20 years ago.
That's true.
What's up with Ghostbusters?
And they're doing it again. With the reboot.
See, Mighty Morphin Power
Another
Rangers.
reboot, which I'll be on the podcast to bitch about or praise, depending. I'm open-minded about
it's not
that.
like the first... that good anyway.
Well, not the first movie. I mean, the show was fun for what it was, at least, early. For what it is. I see what you're saying. I mean, Ghostbusters, we're not comparing Ghostbusters to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, because Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, even though I saw it on my 12th birthday and was super excited and had the toys and have the DVD sitting upstairs, that's kind of a shitty movie, though. I mean, all things considered. So that would be my dream sort of sequel / new, where I'd like to see the Ghostbusters franchise go.
Well, you're putting it out there, so who knows? Maybe Fall Feig.
Well, I tweeted the alternate dimension idea, and I tagged him in it, so maybe he'll be like, all right, I'll hold on to that's a good idea, and not, write it down in his notebook. I don't want any royalties or anything. I just want to see it happen. Because I think if you want to quiet down the people out there that are pissed off that this erased those movies, you reveal that, no, maybe this movie didn't erase those movies. Shut the fuck up. It's fantasy. They can do whatever the hell they want.
True.
So, any other thoughts on Ghostbusters? Recommended from us, basically.
I recommend it. It's fun. It's a fun movie.
It's fun. It's not the
It's
best
fun for families.
It's not the best Ghostbusters movie. It's not the best movie this year, but it's a solid movie, and there's way shittier movies out there. I mean, we talked earlier about Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates, The Secret Life of Pets. Both were spared the crap that this movie is getting. Granted, those aren't franchises, but still. And this is actually way better than both of those movies. I think we would both say, right?
Might become a franchise.
Oh, well, yeah, unfortunately. $100 million at the box office tends to do that. So, I mean, I think that sort of rounds out this one.
I think so.
As I said, next episode, I'm going to talk about best and worst for me from 2016. Thus far. It'll probably be a solo show, just me doing my thing. And I'm thinking, I'm toying around with the idea of doing a sort of a bonus, like, half-hour episode on Swiss Army Man, which I just saw because, man, I got things to say, guys. I gotta communicate to somebody, and, you know, some of you have probably seen it, so maybe you can give me some feedback. Do you have any interest in seeing Swiss Army Man?
No.
It's too weird, right? You don't even know much about it.
It looks weird.
It's weird. It's really weird, but actually, I kind of liked it, which was strange. I don't know. Well, maybe I'll get onto that in a future episode. But as you know, for now, you can find reviews, podcasts, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. You can follow me on Twitter at crookedtable.
And you can follow me at the Vault Key LLC.
Go ahead and give us a like on Facebook. You know, let us know what you thought of this episode or Ghostbusters. Was it worthy of all the shit that was flung its way like a monkey at the zoo? Or was it actually a pretty fun summer blockbuster and people need to chill the fuck out? Clearly, my profanity kind of reveals which way I land on it. But send me a tweet. Let me know what you think. I'm really curious to hear your responses, especially on this movie, considering how divisive it was. But until then, we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Roll credits.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
CROOKED.